welcome to the latest episode of the Lisa Pezik Show, where we are sharing strategies and systems and mindset and tactics to make you go do something different. Well, I guess I shouldn't say make you, to inspire you to go do something different. And even though this show is called the Lisa Pezik Podcast, it really has absolutely nothing to do with me. It's all about you. It's all about being generous. And I'm excited today for our guest because we are talking about money, 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 right? The elephant in the room sometimes. The gap that stops conversations, that halts dreams, and it doesn't have to be that way. So we are going to chat with my lovely friend, Jan Janzen, who is a money expert. I'm going to tell you all about her in a second. Jan, hello. Thanks for being here.
Lisa, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk about money today.
Oh my gosh, Jen, you are just such an interesting human being. I am so glad that we met. I'm so glad we connected. I instantly connected to your energy. And I love that. I'm going to tell you who she is. She's been a serial entrepreneur for 40 years. She bought her franchise at just 19 years of age. Which was that, what was like maybe 5 years ago for you, Jan? No,
yeah. Sounds good.
That sounds good, right? And since then, she's worked in a wide variety of industries, from being president of a network marketing company to having 3 businesses in the automotive field and having a 6-figures healing practice. Now, Jan's focus is to help entrepreneurs overcome money issues, particularly in the sales conversation, so they can create the business they want and they deserve. And I love your motto so much. Jan's motto is that 6 figures is the new minimum wage. If that's not like mic drop, amen, hello, if you're not jumping out of your seat right now going, yeah, then I'm so glad that you're here. And now we're having this money conversation. So, Jan, just tell us, how did you realize that money in the sales conversation is an issue, or that that's a gap for a lot of people in business?
I think that came about, Lisa, because, I've been working as a coach with entrepreneurs for, many decades. And I think because even though I had been trained in sales from the time I was a child, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. And so I don't think there's a tougher sales conversation to be had than selling a watchtower and a wake at someone's door when they don't even want you to be there, right? And so even though I had been trained in sales, I really struggled with the money part. And after my marriage ended back in 2000, I literally, those few years after, I found myself literally homeless, almost bankrupt, and ended up living in a cabin with rats the size of small kittens running up and down the walls. I literally would stand outside my bathroom door, clap my hands, and wait for the rats to run so I could go to the bathroom.
Oh my God.
And when I realized how, people would say to me, but Jan, you're so brilliant, you're so gifted, you're so talented, you're so hardworking. Like, why is your life so messed up? And that's the polite way. That's not what they usually said, but that's the polite version of it. And I would stand there just literally with tears in my eyes and go, I don't know. And I realized eventually, because of my upbringing, I had a really distorted view, not only of life, being raised in a cult, but also of money. And once I got my money stuff worked out, I literally went from living in that cabin, and 18 months later, I was living in a beautiful condo earning a 6-figure income. And so that really is what inspired me to want to help other entrepreneurs, not just deal with the sales conversation, because that's the crux of your business, right? Without sales, you just have an expensive hobby. But you have to have the money part down. Otherwise, you really are out of luck.
What were some of the things you thought about money? Like money was bad, money was icky, money changed people, or what was that limiting mindset that you had?
Oh my goodness, there are so many limiting mindsets, right? But because what's ironic about this is that I was actually raised in a fairly affluent household. My dad had been an international buyer with Canada Safeway. And then he came back to Canada, or back to Vancouver, Canada, and he ended up selling real estate, did very well. So, I mean, I literally wasn't raised in poverty in any way, shape, or form. But I think what it was is that I had been raised with the belief that the world was coming to an end imminently. Like, I was never supposed to get to school. I was never supposed to graduate from high school. I was never going to get married. I certainly wasn't to have children. And I was never going to get old. So money just wasn't important in my life because Armageddon was always just around the corner. Wow. So even like my first husband and I, we cashed in his retirement savings at, in our early 30s. Like, he was 30, I was like 29, and he was working for Canada Safeway. And literally we went to Ecuador and were missionaries for 4 years and spent our retirement money because we never expected to come home from Ecuador. Lisa's got her mouth hanging open. It's okay.
We talk about living in the moment, but that takes it to a whole new level of living in the moment.
Yeah. So that was the belief, was that I didn't need money because I was never going to get old. So I now approach my 60th birthday. It's kind of funny. I was never going to get old, and I was never going to die, right? I was going to live forever in a paradise earth, and I didn't need money. So it was a weird relationship, needless to say, with money. I had money, I could earn money, but I had no attachment to it. I had no emotion to it. I had no reason to really think about it or worry about it
Wow. That's such an interesting flip, because usually it's the opposite. It's the, there isn't enough money. It's the lack mindset and the scarcity mindset of there isn't enough, or I'm not worthy enough, or, all of I can't charge that. Yours is like, what do I need money for? What? That's so interesting. Hence why that probably, as you said, didn't unfortunately play out so great when you were living where you were living. And you had a huge change. I remember you sharing with me that you moved away from Jehovah's Witness, and like everything you ever knew and were raised, you moved away from that.
I did. My husband and I escaped the cult back in 1999. And it was a tough decision because in that moment, we lost all of our friends, all of our family. And then 9 months later, he said to me, I don't want to be married to you anymore. And we'd been married for 18 years. And so he moved out literally, a year to the month that we had left the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then 3 months later, Ford Canada, which was my biggest client in my automotive business, they pulled the plug on my program. And so I literally lost everything in the space of 15 months, which was really tough because, I was struggling with such basic things like, how do you celebrate Christmas? Not freaking out if somebody asked me when my birthday was and what astrological sign I was, debating on whether or not I was going to carry a blood card, any longer, would take a blood transfusion. So many fundamental things. And now I was completely alone, and I was very soon completely destitute as well.
Wow. Do you find that a lot with the money, particularly that people have differing, like you and your husband were on the same page? And then, like you said, you were like, you escaped the cult. That was a differing, you're going this way, I'm going this way. Then you and your husband separated. Do you find that happens a lot with money? Like with relationships or spouses, or one feels one way and one feels the other?
I think money is one of the most divisive things in the world, right? And so when I work with, for example, couples, I'm looking at, and I work with something called sacred money archetypes. And so once people have done the assessment, we're able to really see what makes you tick when it comes to money. And you can have a husband who's got a totally different profile than his wife, for example, or business partners. That's another really super scary area where they can be on totally different pages when it comes to money. And unless you get that worked out, preferably before you make a massive commitment like marriage or a business partnership, right? Unless you get those things worked out and really understand them, I think you're really headed for trouble. Really are. So to me, money has the opportunity to bring us together. Money can change the world. And my whole thing is I think entrepreneurs will change the world, but we have to have wealthy entrepreneurs. And the sad fact is, for example, here in Canada, female entrepreneurs, according to a study done by PayPal and a firm here in Canada, earn $68,000 less than male entrepreneurs. And that, this isn't the National Enquirer, Lisa, this is PayPal. So when they say that it's $68,000 less, that's a heck of a lot of money for women to be earning less. And then I say, well, why? And how do we resolve that? And how do we make the difference?
Yeah. What's your take? Why do you think women are making $68,000 less?
And that's a year. Like, that's not in a lifetime. That's a year.
A year. Okay. So you figure the cumulative.
Oh yeah, no, that's not. Yeah, I know, and I need to clarify that because you probably thought that's like, in a span of an entrepreneur. No, that's like per year. Yeah. So why do they earn less? Well, a huge part of it is that they charge less, right? So a man will usually charge more than a woman. And what's so crazy about this also, Lisa, is that according to Gong, which reviews sales stats for, corporations and things like that, and they listen to conversations and they find out what works and what doesn't. They've listened to like over 1 million hours of sales conversations. Wow. Women actually outsell men by 11%.
Wow.
So we're actually better salespeople than men. Even though we do it all wrong, we interrupt too much, we talk too long, we don't ask enough questions, we do it all wrong. And yet we still outsell them, yet we earn $68,000 less. So where's the problem? And the problem is that although we sell more, we actually charge less. And so it doesn't matter that we sell more, we still aren't catching up, even though we outsell men. Most people don't know that. They think men are the better salespeople, but they're actually not.
It's true. I remember even, my husband and I work together, and a lot of times he'll say, babe, you have to close because people trust you. He's like, they trust you more than they trust me. And I'm like, oh, right. He's like, I don't know if it's because you're nurturing or like what it is, but he's like, I always kind of warm them up. And then when you always come in, he's like, you always close the deal. And I'm like, and I never even realized that in our own business.
And I can tell you part of the reason for that, Lisa, without even listening to a sales conversation that you would have. And that is that women listen differently than men. And consequently, we have what I call wholehearted listening. So we actually really listen to the nuances. We listen to, we were talking before we started the podcast about intuition. We will go more on our intuition. Whereas with a man, it's like, this is the deal, like it or don't, right? And so it's one of the reasons that we actually have the ability to sell well, but it's that money part of not charging enough that really gets us.
Yeah. So and I think I'd be lying if I didn't say that the listeners tuning in right now, they know this is a gap, whether they want to admit that or not, that I'm not charging enough. I know in their heart of hearts and their gut, whether they want to admit it or not, they will say that. So where do they go then? What do they do? Like, is it as simple as just raise your price, or do they
No, it isn't as simple as raise your price, because if you don't believe in what you're doing and the value that you bring, then you are hoot, right? Because you have to believe it. We also have that innate ability to really, I call it smell a rat. And so when
no pun intended from your background.
So when someone is not in sync and in integrity with who they are and what they really believe about themselves, the value they bring, all of those good things, then it comes across, and you will think, oh, I'm hiding it. I believe in myself, I think, kind of idea. And so it's hard if you don't really believe and see the value. You have to be absolutely unapologetically convinced, where you don't have to oftentimes with women, they will justify why it is. And then they'll maybe discount, or they over deliver, they throw in bonuses, they just do all kinds of things, right? But you can't justify it. It has to be something that comes from your absolute core. You know that it's worth it. You know it, and you know it, and you know it. And it's just not even open for negotiation. It is non-negotiable.
That's what I just wrote down. If you see me like feverishly writing, I wrote, you have to be unapologetically convinced of your worth.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I think a lot of that is, you know, we look a lot of times in business, you know, people always ask me, what's the latest, what's the strategy, and what's the system, and none of that matters if you don't know yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, all of that. Now, the archetype stuff that you do, that is some interesting insight into you and your habits. And like, tell me a bit about that. It's so fascinating to me.
Well, there's 8 money archetypes, and these are actually in your DNA. So it's not something that changes. You will always be these archetypes. And out of the 8, I work with the top 3. So for example, you did the assessment before the call, and you were an accumulator, a maverick, and a nurturer. So if you're open to it, I'd love to demonstrate just a little bit for your audience, you know, how I do a reading. Are you good?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Super. So the accumulator, the moniker for the accumulator is inner banker. So you are all about saving money. It is the archetype that is the most committed to saving money. It would be hard pressed to find someone who has an accumulator as their number 1 archetype who doesn't have any money in the bank. Usually that archetype has money in the bank because they're careful. They're frugal. They're the ones that maybe get super excited about, you know, using up all the leftovers in the fridge, right? They just like the other day, my accumulator is my 3rd one. And the other day I made lunch and I used up all these leftovers in a really creative way. And oh my God, you think I just won the lotto? I was so proud of myself, right? Because I had thrown out these leftovers. My husband cannot believe what I do with leftovers. Or like I was on a networking call. And the ladies were all talking about what they wanted to do after the quarantine ended. And they were talking about manis and pedis. And I'm thinking like, mani, pedi. Oh my God, they're talking about manicures and pedicures, right? And they're all talking about this is what they can't wait to do. And I'm thinking, oh my God, we're going to go spend $80 to paint my toenails? Like, I don't think so, right?
Yeah, yes.
Especially where I live, where like we have snow 7 months of the year. Like, I don't need my toenails painted. Thank you very much.
Yes.
That's an accumulator, okay? So the good thing about the accumulator is that you almost always will have money in the bank, and it's rare that you would have an excessive amount of debt. However, because your 2nd archetype is the maverick, I love their moniker. This is my 1st archetype. It's inner rebel with a cause. So you are out to, you know, you don't really care what other people think as much. Now that will be tempered by your 3rd archetype, and I'll explain that in a minute. But you're not so much to cave into the opinion of others. A maverick has a strong personality. They're going to do what they think is right, and they are risk takers. So you can see, I just told you about the accumulator that's frugal, that's cautious about spending money. And now you have a maverick. You can appreciate that that's a little bit like having the devil on one shoulder that's saying, you got to save money, you got to save money. And then you've got this little devil on the other side going, no. There's an opportunity here to make money and make lots of it. Let's go for it. So you would have some conflict going on in your head. Now, when we talked about this before, you said where I tend to have the accumulator is in the house. And I'm more the maverick in my business. So that's kind of how you have separated the devils and put them into their own little playpen, shall we say, so that they're not fighting.
Yeah.
It's a great way that you've done that. Because the other thing about the maverick is you really, from a business point of view, mavericks are great because they're not intimidated by numbers or financial complexity. You are okay handling the money. You're okay handling the investments. You can see a bigger picture. So, it's a great combination for business. Your third one is the nurturer, which is all about giving, and then usually giving some more. And I can almost tell you when someone has a nurturer in their top 3, except in your case, they usually over deliver, undercharge. And then they'll give away bonuses. And, it's just, they will do everything possible to lose money. Now, because you have an accumulator and a maverick who are not going to let that happen, it really will pull the reins in on your nurturer and say, you can't do that, can't get away with that. You have to make sure that you are charging enough. Now, you'll love people to death. You will be a sweetheart. People will really feel they can trust you. They'll like you. They will feel very safe and comfortable with you. But because of your accumulator and your maverick, you will not allow the nurturer to rule the roost.
That is freaky how accurate. That is 100% me to T. And it's funny because my husband lays his head on the pillow at night and he's like snoring in like 3 seconds flat. And me, it's like, you're like, you have this little voice over here and this little voice over here. And I'm like, yeah, that's sometimes what keeps me up at night is that fight between this and this, right? Oh, that's so true. That's so true.
These archetypes are uncannily accurate. I've done hundreds of readings now, Lisa, and honestly, I have yet to have someone say to me, "Oh, no, it doesn't apply to me." Matter of fact, most people are absolutely like you, like, "Oh my goodness, like how is she reading my mind?" Yeah, they are really very, very accurate. So you can imagine. And this is where, we were talking earlier about, husbands and wives and also business partners. You can appreciate you have your little devils all yakking at you. Now you're dealing with a business partner or a marriage mate or a romantic partner. And now you're dealing with their little devils too. And unless you really understand this and can say, oh, that's your maverick showing up, sweetie. Okay, let's talk about what kind of risk we're both comfortable with. Or let's talk about setting up that nurturer bank account to make sure that it's not our emergency money, our rainy day money, our mortgage money that's going out to help that poor person that we feel real compassion for. That's where these conversations are critical. But until you know what you're dealing with, it's like a shot in the dark. And that's why I love these sacred money.
Yeah, I love that. And I would say even for me, it's like evolved over time. Like I would say at one point, I didn't have the nurturer reined in and I wasn't charging what I was worth. And I was constantly trying to justify and scarcity. I didn't want to lose the sale. So I would do whatever needed to be done to get it, whether it was lowering prices, like you said, or throwing in more bonuses or, and it's interesting to take it back to that you have to be unapologetically convinced of your worth. It was all the inner work that I had to do to be able to rein in that nurturer and really say, okay, this is what I'm worth. This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is the price, or this is what we deliver, take it or leave it in a nice way kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I know. And even just like, none of our friends and family are set up the way like we're set up, like the same, even the accumulator. It's like, we've got these investments and we've got these RESPs and then we've got the college fund for Oliver. And then we have the, this fund to this. And then we, like you said, we have the giving fund and then we have the joint account and then we have the separate accounts. And like, we just have money all over the place accumulated, but that gives me peace of mind to know that everything's been looked at and taken care of. And I'll tell you, I make a mean stir fry with all the stuff left in the fridge. That is a true story. Me and my husband argue about that sometimes because I'm like, I hate wasting food. I can't stand wasting food. I feel like maybe that's the nurturer in me too. I'm like, people in Africa are starving and we are like throwing out food in our fridge because it went bad. Like we have to find a way to use this food. That's like wasting food is a huge pet peeve of mine. So that made me laugh when that was the first thing that you said, because I was like, my husband and I rarely argue, but that is like the argument that we have. Like food in the fridge.
And I would make soup because my background is Russian. So, Russian women make soup, right? So yeah, I got really good at using up leftovers in soups and things like that, right? Yeah. So
So interesting.
What you were saying there was the confrontation. I just want to eliminate that because, life is already challenging enough. So to be battling with yourself or battling with someone that you really need to work with or love, it just isn't worth it. And, it's a simple assessment. Takes less than 10 minutes. And, then I do a 15-minute complimentary reading. But what you said as well hit home, because it's not just about that sales conversation. It's all the inner work that has to happen so that when you get to the sales conversation, you're absolutely totally at peace.
Yeah.
Right? At peace. And so, when I talk to people about my private coaching, for example, I give that number. I don't have sweaty palms. I don't have sweaty armpits. I don't have my heart pounding. I don't feel nauseous. I don't feel like I'm going to throw up. None of it. It's just like, this is it. And if you like it, you like it. And if you don't, you don't. And it's so calm. But I've got to that point where I am unapologetically convinced that I am worth every single penny and more.
Yeah. That was some of the best advice. Exactly what you just said was some of the best advice I was ever given. Don't be tied to the outcome. Yeah. You just say it as it is. And it's like, take it or leave it. And you're not going to be upset whether they take it, or you're not going to be upset whether they leave it. Because it's not a reflection of how they feel about you or all these internal monkey mind stories we create that aren't true. They don't trust me. They don't believe in me. I'm not good enough. Like none of it's not any of that. And I remember even people in sales saying to me, I was in a mastermind and I was sitting next to this like 8-figure earner from France. And I was just making, not that money is a, thing, but I was like just making 6 figures. And I was like, how in the world did you create this kind of incredible wealth in your life? And that was the first thing he said to me. He said, you have to sell and not be tied to the outcome. He said, you can't care which way it goes. And he said, you actually have to say to people like you mean it, and that you mean it, like you should do this and this is a good deal. Like when you get up there and you're like, my price is, it's $20,000 to work with me. It's going to change your life and you should do it. Like, and that's it. He's like, and then whether they do it or they don't, that's on them and you let it go. And I thought, wow, it can really be that simple. And it's like, yes, when you know your worth and you believe in yourself and you're unapologetic, it really is that simple.
And I also have an incredible faith that the right people come into my life to work with me at the right time, both for me and for them. So when someone, can't do it in that moment, it doesn't mean that it's no forever. It means it's no in that moment. And maybe they need to grow a little bit, or maybe I need to grow a little bit before we actually will be a really good fit. So I trust that. I created a saying, I don't know, probably in the depth of my despair, it's not what I prefer, but I trust it's perfect. And that one line has got me through my life, because honestly, there's been lots of things that I didn't prefer, but I trusted, was perfect. I ended up traveling the world for 9 years, Lisa, and my husband, the man who's now my husband, we were actually in the Philippines, and we were on the island of Bohol, and we got a phone call from a business associate of my husband's from Hong Kong. And she said, I get you need to leave the Philippines. I want you to come to Hong Kong. Well, we had only been in the Philippines for less than 3 weeks. And I really had, I had a whole list of things I wanted to see, wanted to do. We were loving this little island. And I was a little bit annoyed. It was kind of like, well, gee, why do we have to leave? And Greg said, we need to go. And I said, fine, I'll book us out of here. Well, if it wasn't 2 days later, Bohol got hit by an earthquake that decimated the island. The resort we were staying in was badly damaged. The roads that we had traveled on just 2 days prior, to this were absolutely destroyed. Sites we had seen were really badly damaged. And when we looked back at that, we thought, wow, it wasn't what we preferred at the time, but I trusted it was perfect. And I could tell you story after story after story after story after story like that of our travels, where something would show up and we would go, this isn't what we planned, but we trusted it was perfect. We moved on, and it turned out to be to our highest and best good. So I apply that in my business as well, that if someone isn't a right fit for me and I don't make the sale, it's absolutely perfect. It's not what I prefer, but I trust it's perfect.
Yeah, I heard it once as energy protection or
Ah,
spirit's redirection. And I was like,
yes.
oh, that's so true. It's a
Yeah.
no for something. It's a no for a reason.
Mhm.
It's a no for something like you said. It's not what I prefer, but I trust that it's perfect.
Yes, it's perfect.
I
And
love
the
that.
and the other thing about that price thing, which I think is a really good little exercise that your listeners can apply, is, and it was something that I learned from some of my coaches and mentors, and that was, let's say your price is $5,000. Okay, so it's $5,000 to coach with you, which is low, but that might be a stretch for some of your clients. So you say, so $5,000 pass the salt, $5,000 pass the salt. You just walk around the house going, so you're in the shower, $5,000. My fee is $5,000 pass the salt, $5,000 pass the salt. And what happens is then your subconscious mind just likens this $5,000 to pass the salt. It links it to this thing that you'll say, pass the salt, right? So when you
Yes.
say it's $5,000, there's none of that emotion that shows
Yeah.
up that it would if you hadn't kind of just linked it to something that is so innocuous as pass the salt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it
Like,
really works. I swear. I mean, it was one of the things I just did. I'd go, so my fee is this, and pass the salt. And I did this for, a couple of weeks. And and then the first time it came out of my mouth, I was kind of shocked because I wasn't feeling any of the heart pounding and the nauseousness, none of it. It was just kind of like, yeah, it's as simple as pass the salt.
I love that. It's just normalizing that. I love that. Like not
Totally
making
normalizing it.
not making a big deal. Because
Pass
if
the
you don't
salt.
make a big deal, they're not going to make a big deal.
Oh,
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I was thinking about the archetype thing too. A lot of times how, you know, we want to compare the comparisonitis. And
yeah.
there's no comparing, I'm assuming, when it comes to that. Like, oh, the accumulator is better than the maverick, and the maverick is better than the
No,
nurturer.
they're not. They all have such amazing qualities. And it's a good thing we do have, a wide variety of archetypes and people, how they view and see life. But and the other reason that I really love this is that, for example, when I'm starting to work with a client, I know their archetypes. So if they're a strong nurturer and the ruler archetype is low, I'm not going to talk to them about building a Martha Stewart empire, because that's not what they're all about. That's not what's going to drive them. What's going to drive them and get them to do the work is what's important to them, which is helping people. So I want to know, like, what's your cause? Like, what is it what are you concerned about? It might be the children in Africa. It might be animals. It might be whatever. It might be the forest, whatever it is. That way they're driven by something that really means something to them, instead of me guessing what should drive them.
Mm,
Not everybody wants to be a ruler. Not everybody wants an empire, right? Not everybody wants to
yes.
be a workaholic, right?
Yeah.
So that's where, not everybody wants to be a romantic or a celebrity. So that's where it really helps you to now also drive yourself in your business and also have a good insight into your clients.
Mm, I love that. I was just thinking about how valuable that would be for me with my clients, knowing what truly motivates them. Like
Yes.
we get to it in our fact finding and discovery, but I love the fact of just having it. Like you said, they take a 10-15 minute assessment and it's right there for
It's right
that,
there.
and you see it. I love it because you're right. That was one thing for me. I never resonated, I guess, with me being nurturer and like of service. That whole like boss babe on my yacht, sipping my champagne with my empire, that does not motivate or drive me whatsoever. But owning a rescue farm, doing mission work, like having a big charity, like that drives me. So that,
And it would
yeah,
drive you,
that
right?
makes perfect sense. That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. Oh my goodness. So lastly, I just want to dive into your motto. That's 6-figure. Oh, and don't worry, listeners, if you're like, how do I get this archetype? And you're like, want it right now? I'll tell you. I'll tell you at the end. Don't worry. We'll have it there for you. It will be available. I promise. I want to dive into 6 figures as the new minimum wage. Tell me a bit. Where did that come from? Why did you trademarked it, which I love. So smart. Tell me about that.
It was just the craziest thing. I was on a Zoom call like this. It wasn't a podcast, but it was just, I was with a couple of other entrepreneurs. We were talking about something. Out of my mouth came with huge emotion and almost vehemence. Like I don't know where it came, like this came from the tip of my toes. And I went, and 6 figures is the new minimum wage. And then we all kind of stopped and they looked at me and I said, wow, okay. Like, I don't know who said that. I heard it for the first time as it came out of my mouth, right? So I thought from that reaction, I thought, well, let me just try this out. So over the next couple of weeks, I just threw it out, 6 figures is the new minimum wage. And then somebody said to me, hey, can I use that? And I said, no, I'm trademarking it.
Smart.
And I said, I'm trademarking it. And it was just kind of funny. So yeah, I've trademarked it. But it was funny because I realized, I was on the road for 9 years. And when I came back to North America, to Canada, I was, connect with a lot of friends, a lot of entrepreneurs that I'd known, 9 years previously. And they were still at that same point where they weren't prepared for retirement. They were still thinking $5,000 a month was going to cut it. And I'm thinking like, wow, what's happened to inflation? When I was traveling, people would say, how do you afford to travel? And I'd say, I don't know how you afford to live in Canada. Like really, it's cheap to travel compared to living in Canada.
Yes.
And, that's the thing, is that what are people thinking they're all going to be Walmart door greeters? By the time by the time I'm 80, Walmart will probably be totally online. We won't have stores, right? So like what are you going to do? Yeah. It's expensive to live, and it gets more expensive because as you get older, you need more help. You may need more medical care. Like really, we are in a serious position. And this is a first world country. We are a developed country. And I think because I spent most of those 9 years in underdeveloped countries, places like rural El Salvador, the back roads of Cambodia, things like that, like really seriously saw poverty at a level that can make me cry. And I'm thinking, wow, we have so much opportunity here in North America, and yet we're not making enough money to even take care of ourselves, never mind make the difference that I think we're here to make for a lot of other people. Yeah. And so that's why 6 figures is the new minimum wage. It's like non-negotiable in my world. You need to be making 6 figures as an entrepreneur because it's expensive to be an entrepreneur now. There's a lot of things you need. We have to pay taxes. We have to do those things. It doesn't leave you a lot of money left over for paying your daily expenses, having enough money for retirement. And then what difference do you want to make in the world? Like what contribution do you want to make?
I love that so much. Like, yes to everything you're saying. And I remember when I had weird money mindset, someone said to me, money is just a tool. Money is a tool to be able to do, like you said, take care of yourself, but then contribute in the world. And then a mentor said, if you don't make the money, you can't support the message. And I thought, wow, is that true? Right. And you're right. 6 figures is the new minimum wage.
So I'm going to suggest that instead of thinking of it as a tool, just a different thought here, Lisa. We'll see what you think of this one. Because to me, I think of a tool as kind of like, a hammer or a dishwasher or, a lawnmower kind of thing, right? It's something that I use and I don't have any kind of romantic or love a connection with, right? So if you thought of money as your best friend or partner, and I am now in partnership with money because money is energy. Right? Money, it has energy. It is energy. So if we think about it as our best friend, our partner, and that now we are creating a mutual goal between the energy of money and our energy, and now we are in partnership together to reach those goals.
I love that. I remember when we first got together and we just met each other and we were chatting, you were like, yeah, I do manifestation, but I do a little bit differently. You were like, I told the universe, well, here's what I'm going to do. And then here's what you need to do, or something along the lines of that. And I thought that was so clever. And
yeah, I remember that now. How it came up was we were talking about asking for, support from the other side. And I said, well, I probably have the most radical relationship with the universe of anybody, and which is kind of odd coming from a Jehovah's Witness background. But I remember when my gift of healing really showed up, and it was made me uncomfortable. I was seeing things, I could hear things, I knew things that I shouldn't theoretically know. And I really got that I was supposed to do this full time. And I was like having a HS moment, which does not stand for Holy Spirit, right? I really was. I was like, holy moly. Like, are you serious? An XJW, you're going to have me do that? Like, And so I said, okay, here's the deal, God. I'll do it, but I am not doing the marketing. So I'm not getting up at the crack of dawn to be out at a networking group at 7:00. I am not going to work all day on people's issues and then have to go to a networking event at night. All right, I will do this, even though it makes me really uncomfortable. I will do it. But this is what you're going to do. You're going to bring me the people. And if you don't bring me the people, I'm not doing it. And I ended up being booked 6 weeks out with no marketing, like no website, nothing. I was just booked 6 weeks out. And I just said to people, my business is built on referral. And it was. So what I had, I developed a 6-figure healing practice, which is pretty unusual. Like, a lot of people can do that with a healing practice, right? But I was really adamant that was I would do my job, but the universe had to do its. And I still maintain that. Like, I'll do my work, but you need to support me. I'm the one down here, for heaven's sakes. Like,
so I love that so much. And listeners, that's an example of being unapologetic.
Totally. Oh yeah, no, I'm totally unapologetic with that too. Cause I really think it's hard down here. Life as a human is challenging. And when we think about what we've just been through, Lisa, with the pandemic, I say to, a lot of my friends, hey, we signed up for this. I don't know what we were smoking or drinking. It must've been something good when we said yes to this, but we said yes to being here in 2020 and whatever is coming for, this year. And I expect an incredible amount of support. And that means financial, emotional, mental, spiritual, every way. I need to be supported to do the work I'm here to do. And I don't think we ask enough. I don't think we demand enough. I think we're just way too, we pussyfoot around it, hoping we don't offend the universe. And I just think that's got to go.
Yeah. Even the very simple exercise of like vision boarding. I can't tell you how many friends, colleagues, people are like, I don't even know what I want. Like, I don't even know how to begin with a vision board. And I'm like, well, that's your problem. I'm like, you're not allowing yourself that space to dream. You're thinking that you have to know exactly how to do every single thing in order to achieve it. And you don't.
You don't. Matter of fact, I'm not even concerned with the how, because that's not my issue. Right. I just have to say, yes, this is what I'm doing. And then you figure it out. Like, right. Like, you figure it out.
100%. Half the time I said yes to things I haven't done. I had no clue how.
There's your maverick.
Exactly. It's like jump off the cliff first and know that the parachutes will appear for me.
Always does.
Always does.
Always does.
I love it. Keep going, please.
No, I was saying that's been my whole life. I mean, at 17 and a half, I got on a bus by myself and moved from Vancouver to Montreal. I left my 6-figure healing practice, said I want to travel the world. Was in a brand new relationship, and said, hey, I'll take my healing practice on the road, and, Greg will wait for me. And he did, So, my husband and I decided, hey, we're going to leave everything. We're going to go to Ecuador and be missionaries. Like, I think we just don't live enough.
Yeah.
Right. We live in such this cocoon of protection and all the what ifs, and the what ifs are going to happen no matter what. And I know so many people who said, oh, I can't do what you did. I can't leave and I can't travel. And now I'm so grateful that I did when we could. Right.
Yeah.
And so I always say, what are you holding back from not doing because you're afraid? Because, turn it over to the universe and say, hey, this is what I really feel called to do in my heart. This is what I know. And at a soul level, I need to be doing. I just don't know how. So I'm willing to jump off the cliff, but you need to be there to support me.
100%.
And that's all the universe is waiting for. We just need to say help.
100%. And I remember even looking at my vision board, my husband and I, my son, my 7-year-old did it. And like, I have just, just these incredible, lofty, massive goals on that thing. And I remember just kind of looking at that and I'm like, damn, like how, like getting caught in the how, like, I'm like, how the hell am I gonna, and my husband looks at me and he goes, babe, it's all doable. He's like, it's all doable. He's like, it's all possible. It's all doable. And he's like, don't you think that, you know, everyone else that has achieved that had that dream, he's like, they were doing the same exact thing you're doing right now. He's like, they were looking at their board or looking at the thing they wrote going, holy shit. Like, did I really write that on a piece of paper? Or did I really put that on a vision board? It's all doable. And I think that's the flip when you change from how the hell am I going to do this to, oh yeah, that's happening. It's doable. It's doable.
Totally.
I love that. I love that. So tell them about, and I will put it in the show notes as well, if they're driving or cooking stir fry from the leftovers in their fridge or a soup. How can they get their money archetype assessment, or what do you got for them to connect with you?
They just simply go to the number 8, moneyarchetypes.com and do the assessment. And then they get a copy of the results. I get a copy of the results. They can book their appointment with me, their reading with me. And yeah, that's how easy it is.
I love that. So I will put that in the show notes. I just love you. Thank you for having such an amazing conversation about just the realness of life and business and fear and doing the darn thing, and just your vulnerability to share, you know, what happened in your life and where you came from and where you are now. I think that's so important when we see movers and shakers that are doing amazing things, to know that, you know, you overcame hard stuff and they can do that too. Right.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. It was wonderful being here. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome. So I hope you will take Jan up on her offer, Know Your Money Archetype. It's going to help you so much in this year, because I know you have big goals. I know you have big dreams. I know you have big plans, and you don't have to do it alone. Any tools and support that is being offered to you, take it. And the 8moneyarchetypes.com is one of the first steps that you can take. So Jan, thank you so much for being here with me. And listeners, thank you so much for being here as well. We will catch you next time on The Lisa Pezik Show.